Right, well I was able to get that to turn. I had to put a drop of acetone onto the retaining ring, then hold the rear lens with one spanner and rotate the retaining ring with another. That's certainly moving now, but it's tight. That's it. It's loose. I'll tip that lens out. Now I'm trying to judge whether there's any haze on the surface I can see ahead of me. It's very difficult to tell. This one, there's a bit of dust on it now, but that's just from the disassembly. If I hold it at an angle, can I see anything on it? There may be some haze on there, so I'm going to clean these surfaces. The surface in there and the surface here. Obviously I can't get down to the cement layer, the balsam layer below. Well, that appears to have cleaned up somewhat. I can certainly still see that sparkle. I mean, that's definitely in the balsam. Let's try this piece of glass. And I need to put this on something, so I've got it supported. That should be good. Let's balance that on the top of something which you can't see. Make sure I've blown the dust off it, checking against reflected window light to see if it's clean. Take the shutter with the lens attached, pop that lens back into place. And I'm looking from the rear now. I haven't got my retainer ring in yet. But that haze is gone, or the vast majority of it's gone. So it was haze on one of two surfaces. It was either haze on the inside surface of the rearmost component or on the outside surface of the inner cemented pair. I'm just carefully using the tip of a screwdriver to rotate this retaining ring. That's fine. And that's back in the same position it was when I started. I can tell by the loss of paint at those particular points. So I'm just cleaning this outside surface again. Yeah, that's much better. Quite happy with that. And let's just use the magic marker to blacken out that visible brass there. Good. Okay, so that is the shutter assembly, lens and shutter assembly, ready to go back on the camera, which of course is the next thing to do. Right, let's pop this into position. Seems fine. Now I've got to get my synchronization right between the cocking action of the camera and the shutter itself. Let's try advancing this. The shutter didn't fire, it tells me it wasn't cocked. So I'll advance that a tooth on the curved rack. Do it one tooth at a time. It's the same answer, it's not cocked yet. Now it is. That's cocking. Okay, now I'm going to check this. I'm going to put it round to the 500th of a second position and try the same thing. It didn't fire. Now when you've got it on the 500th of a second position, it has a lot more resistance to the cocking action, so if it's not quite pushing far enough, that's where you'll see the problem. So I'll move that one more tooth. That's firing reliably on the 500th of a second position. 500th of a second position there. So I know that's correct. I'll put the retaining ring in the back of the camera. Nudge that down into position. Just engage the tool, check that that shutter is correctly seated. It is, but it's not tight yet. Check it still cocks and fires. It does. Get the tool back on there and do it up tight. That's all good. I'm just going to check my focus next and I'll report back. Well, as luck would have it, the lens doesn't focus to infinity, and that means that the lens and focus is not coming back far enough into the body. It's a considerable amount, more than I can compensate for by removing that shim, that paper washer. So it suggests to me that the focus scale ring has moved significantly relative to the focus helical at some stage. So I am going to move it back the other way. And of course I've got to do this in stages because I don't know when I'm going to have it correct. At least I've got my alignment marks, I've got a start position. So I need to move my focus scale ring round quite a considerable amount, I think. Line that up with that other alignment mark and then I'll check that. Okay, so I've shifted it by the width of my alignment marks at that point. And this may be, I think it's not enough of an adjustment. That's not coming back to the infinity position at that point. I can't bring it back that far. So let's get it back as far as I can and then remove the paper shim and try that. Excuse me. Alright, let's get this as far across as it can go. I honestly don't think that'll go down any further than that, which is interesting, because that's where I started it off. I'm going to tighten those screws back up and try removing that paper shim. I don't believe it's thick enough to make the difference. Now that looks like I should be able to get a bit deeper than that. I'm going to try moving that again. Yeah, let's try a little bit more. No, I can't go that far. No, still too far. The focus should be able to come up hard against that stop. Yeah, with that satisfying click as it hits the end of its travel. That's as close as I can take it. Now I'm going to remove my paper shim. It's a heavy one as paper shims go, but it's still just a paper shim. I'll put the lens and shutter assembly back in the camera. That must be one tooth too far advanced because I can't quite cock that. Right, that cocks and fires. I'll put the retaining ring back on and then I'll check my focus again. And after that, if that doesn't fix it, I have got some serious thinking to do. I'll report back. Well, that's it. That's it. That's good. It's right on the absolute limit of how close I can get my focus to come back into the body, and with the paper shim removed. There's no more adjustment left there, but it's just bang on. It's just exactly as it should be. And so the focus is good. And it's right on the limit of how much I can get, because I don't hear a positive click there. It obviously comes back to the infinity mark, but I'm not hearing that sharp click that I'm accustomed to hear as it gets round to the infinity position. However, that's it. That's good. So the focus there is good. Of course, now I've moved my focus, I need to check my rangefinder, because very likely the rangefinder is not correct. And it comes, the images meet, the infinity images meet before I get back to the infinity position. So I've got to do an adjustment. Let me get my rewind knob off. While I'm here, I'm going to check the action of the shutter release to make sure it's timed correctly with the action that releases the film advance to allow you to wind on again. So I'm going to squeeze very slowly and gently on the shutter release. And it just released the film release before it got to the point where the shutter would release by a considerable margin, so there's an adjustment to make there too. Let's just swing the arm out on the shutter release, the film advance lever. Remove the screws from either end of the top cover. The screw at this end of the top cover is ugly looking, and the end of the case doesn't look that flash either. It's a bit marked. Let's see if any of that rubbish cleans off. Looks a bit better. Right, top off. First I'll adjust my rangefinder. Now it's the infinity stop position that I'm concerned with, so I'll just loosen my locking screw there, and I'm fairly confident I've got to rotate the arm in slightly. I just moved it very slightly, see how I get on. A little bit more, but not much. All of these adjustments are exceptionally slight. A little bit is a lot. You hardly need to move things at all. I'll just check that again. I think I want to just do a little bit more. That'll do. That's nice. The image is meet at infinity just at the right spot. Now my adjustment for the point at which the shutter and the film advance are released at the same point. Let's get the film advance lever back on there. Run the screw back down there. I need to be able to do this repeatedly so I can get that action to check that that action works correctly. There we go. So what's happening here is that as the shutter release comes down, it presses on this screw here, and this arm is on that screw, and that arm is too far down the screw, so that effectively it's moving down to the other position too quick. I've got to loosen this lock collar, drive that screw down, lifting the arm up. So let's just remove that and see if I can achieve it. First I've got to get the collar loose, which is sometimes easier said than done. Yeah, no, today's no different than any other day in that regard. Try backing that screw up. Okay, that's enabled me to do that. So I could drive that screw down, lifting the arm up, don't I? Okay. So I'll hold back that locking collar, drive that screw down a couple of turns. Let's put the shutter release back in. and see what the action's like. The film release, I'd heard the first click. Yeah, it's released the film release before it got to the point where the shutter fired. So I need to make another adjustment, but we're heading in the right direction. Probably put about a probably less than a quarter of a turn on the screw there. Getting the point at which the film advance releases and the shutter releases at the same point is often a bit tricky. It's a problem that really only affects people who are careful camera users. People who gently squeeze the shutter release until the shutter fires. That's the film releasing there, and the shutter later. And what happens is that they will, if they press it very lightly and gently, if the shutter fires first, they release their finger from the button, and the film release hasn't worked, and so they have to press the button each time to unlock the film release. Heavy-handed people have no problem because they just jump on there and they push the button down as far as it'll go with each attempt, and as a result they will get everything to unlock every time without a problem at all. It's the careful users that have the trouble, not the clumsy buggers like me. It's getting closer, but we're still releasing the film advance just before we get to the shutter release. Yeah, that's the film advance releasing. Right. That's quite a large amount of adjustment to have to make too. That suggests that it was well out. And I've still got to turn my locking collar back into position once I get this to my satisfaction. Let's try again. No, still get that to happen. Of course, a slight difference in rotation of the shutter and the body will also make a difference to this setting. That's better. Yep, that's good. That's just where it should be. Right, let's see if I can get that locking collar done up right at that point. Unfortunately, the slots in the locking collar are running fore and aft, and I'm having trouble getting my screwdriver over that. Oh no, there we go. That worked. So, the focus needed adjustment, which was achieved by shifting the relative position of the focus scale ring on the outer helical. The rangefinder needed adjustment because it was ridiculously out even before we started anything. And the shutter release needed adjustment because the shutter and the film advance weren't releasing at the same point in the stroke of the shutter release action. Remove my advance lever. Check to see how many fingerprints I've put on the rangefinder. None. Blow any dust out of the top cover. Put the top cover back in position. Put the shutter release lever back in position. Run the screw in. Check that the action is good. Do that upright. Oh, that's good. That's much better. Our rewind knob. Got to get the spring seated correctly over the centre of that boss there. The screw needs to be driven right through the lot because on this model it doesn't screw into the base of the rewind knob. Put something through the fork of the rewind. I'll turn that. Make sure that's all tight. That's good. Two screws to hold the top cover in position. Now these screws are quite short. They're shorter than the similar screws used on the Retina IIc cameras. If you're repairing cameras and you lose the screw on a 2A or a 1A, that doesn't want to pick up, something odd there. Take note that using a later screw, which are too long, come too far in at this end and they will foul the film advance mechanism and cause it to stick. If you have to use a longer screw because you've lost one of the originals, use it at the rewind end. It won't cause you any problems at all. Okay, so that's good. Its original problems, its features, what did it say? Stiff focusing ring, can't reach infinity mark, that's good. Rangefinder off, that's good. Zeiss bumps. Well, we dealt with the Zeiss bumps on the base. The Zeiss bumps on the hinge line, I'm not going to do those. And the Zeiss bump on the back, likewise I'm doing nothing about that. They're too small for the potential gain to outweigh the potential risk of tearing the leather trying to get to those. Broken paper washer dropped off from the lower door hinge. Well, that was here. Now both of those washers were gone. These struts were bent. What else do I want to achieve? Well, I want to improve the look of that leather. So I'll come back when I've done that. Alright, I'm fairly happy with the appearance of this now. That leather certainly looks improved. I wouldn't say it was wonderful, but it's better than it was. There's nothing more I can really do about that. I don't think I've got any front doors with good leather on them, or better leather, I should say. And I don't want to be reduced to having to join four pieces up to try and make that cover. However, everything else is working. Focus reaches infinity. Shutter's good. Timing of the shutter and the film advance is now correct. Rangefinder's good. Shutter's working correctly. And all in all, it's a fairly tidy example of the Retina IIa. I'm not chasing that Zeiss bump. I'd go crazy. One of the problems with dealing with Zeiss bumps on these cameras is that this paint along the edges of the back here really doesn't stick there well at all. Inevitably, if you're moving this leather here, chances are that it'll peel off and tear some of that paint away with it where it was glued to it. This patch here is a fairly noticeable patch of missing paint there. What caused that? Well, this is what caused that. These were the instructions stuck on the back. And as you can see, the piece of masking tape lifted that paint straight off. So the paint is exceptionally delicate. It was never done well. Basically, the aluminium was not, they didn't use an etch primer or anything to make the paint bite onto that aluminium. And aluminium is not a particularly easy metal to get paint to stick to on a good day. But they certainly didn't do it well. On the Retina IIc, 3c models by comparison, they'd got that down fairly well. The paint on those is stuck nicely. The 2As, not so much. Right, thanks for watching. I'm very pleased to see the end of this one, and I want to send it home.